I've lived in Salem for 48 years. I've lived here all my adult life, and I've grown old and will probably die here soon. My house is on Oak Street, not the most upscale neighborhood, but not a slum. It's 2 stories high, with a small garden that I still tend despite my 67 years. 15 years ago, I buried my husband, Arthur Holt. A heart attack, sudden and unrelenting. He was only 58. The doctors said he'd overworked himself. Arthur worked as an inspector for the IRS, pedantic to the point of boredom at work and at home. It was a quality that irritated me for all 34 years of our marriage. But after he died, I realized I missed even that. His meticulousness with finances left me with enough savings to not worry about the future. I, too, have worked with numbers all my life, as an accountant for a construction company. I retired 5 years ago. My job was never a passion, but it gave me stability. Arthur and I were not spenders, saving for old age, for emergencies, for the education of our only son, Dwight. Dwight is now 42 and works for an insurance company. Nothing great, but it's a big job with a big name. He's been married to Irene for 14 years. Irene. Every time I say that name, I want to spit it out like a cherry pit. Tall, slender, with flawless skin and hair that always looks like it just came from the hairdresser. She's 39 and works as a coordinator at a travel agency. I thought that with that kind of experience, she should be more grateful for the trips I paid for. They have 2 children, my grandchildren. Chloe, 12, a smart, somewhat withdrawn girl, and Austin, 9, a boisterous and perpetually disheveled boy. I see them less often than I'd like. Much less often. It's Tuesday and I'm sitting at the kitchen table going over the bills. The old accountant's habit of stacking everything up, analyzing expenses, planning a budget, my bills, Dwight and Irene's bills. I pay for a lot of things in their lives. The mortgage on the house they live in, their grandchildren's private school, Dwight's car, the silver SUV he takes Irene shopping in. I even regularly fund their bank accounts when they're short a paycheck. It all started after Arthur died. Dwight was there for me, supporting me. That was the first time I ever wrote him a big check for a down payment on a house. It seemed like the right thing to do for my son. Irene was pregnant with Chloe, and they needed a place to live. I didn't want my grandson or granddaughter growing up in a cramped rented apartment. Other expenses followed. A car loan when Dwight's old Ford broke down, paying for Irene's delivery at a private clinic, then private daycare for Chloe, then the same for Austin. The bills kept mounting, and each time Dwight and Irene became more and more distant. For the last 5 years, I only see my grandchildren on holidays or when Dwight and Irene need money. They come to my house, the grandkids awkwardly hug me, and Dwight starts the conversation from afar, but always boils it down to one thing. They don't have enough for anything important. Chloe's piano lessons, sports camp for Austin, a new roof for the house, a trip to Christmas. I always agree to help. What am I supposed to do? This is my only son, my only grandchildren. Irene only smiles at me when I write a check. Other times she looks right through me, or worse, condescendingly, as if I were a feeble-minded old woman who doesn't understand modern life. "Beatrice," she says to me, "you're not going to wear that dress to Thanksgiving, are you? It looks so aged." Or, "Beatrice, why are you still using that ancient cell phone? The kids make fun of it." I hold back, smile, and say I'm comfortable with it. I don't want to start a conflict. I don't want to give them an excuse to bring their grandchildren even less often. Yesterday, I made a decision that felt like the right thing to do. I called my bank manager and withdrew a substantial amount from my account. Then I went to the same travel agency where Irene worked, not her but a coworker, and bought a trip to Hawaii for 5 people, Dwight, Irene, Chloe, Austin, and myself. 2 weeks at a luxury hotel on Maui, overlooking the ocean. Full board, excursions included. Departing in 10 days. I imagined how we'd walk along the beach, how I'd teach Austin how to build sand castles, how I'd listen to Chloe play the piano in the hotel lobby. Maybe we can even have a real conversation with Dwight like we used to. Maybe Irene would stop looking at me like I was a burden when she realized I could be pleasant company. I was going to surprise them tonight. I put the tickets and hotel brochures in a pretty envelope, bought a bottle of champagne, and took a cab to their house. Their house is much bigger than mine, 2 stories, with a large manicured lawn and terrace. Dwight opened the door with some surprise. Mom, we weren't expecting you. I know, darling, I said, trying to contain my excitement. I have a surprise for all of you. May I come in? He reluctantly stepped aside, letting me into the house. Irene was sitting in the living room, flipping through a magazine. Chloe was upstairs tutoring, and Austin was at a friend's house, so I'd been told. To what do we owe the visit, Beatrice? Irene asked, not even getting up to say hello. I sat down in the chair across from her, put a bottle of champagne on the table, and took out an envelope. I have a gift for the whole family, I said, holding it out to Dwight. Open it, son. Dwight took the envelope with a puzzled expression and pulled out the tickets. His eyebrows went up when he realized what they were. Hawaii? Mom, are you serious? Totally. I couldn't contain my smile. 2 weeks in Maui at the Wailea Beach Hotel. 5 stars, full board. I thought we could all use a vacation together. Dwight looked confused, but Irene put the magazine aside and straightened up. Her eyes narrowed as she took the tickets from her husband's hands. You bought tickets for 5? She asked, running her eyes over the paperwork. Yes, I nodded. For the 4 of you and me. I thought it would be a great opportunity to spend time together as a family. Chloe and Austin have never been to Hawaii, and I've read that it's... Beatrice? Irene interrupted me in the tone one would use with a naughty child. We appreciate your gesture, but we were already planning a family vacation. Oh, I was confused. But you didn't say anything. We wanted it to be a surprise for the kids, Irene continued, though I could see from Dwight's face that it was the first time he'd heard about it. But, of course, since you paid for the tickets... She was silent for a moment, examining the documents more closely. Are these tickets fully refundable? She asked. Yes, but... Great, Irene smiled, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Then maybe we can exchange them. For 4 tickets on different dates. I felt something cold twist inside me. Exchange them? But I thought we were going together. Mom, Dwight interjected, finally realizing what was happening. That's very generous of you, really. But Irene and I were thinking of something a little more private. Just us and the kids, do you understand? I didn't understand. Or rather, I was beginning to understand too well. But I paid for this trip for all of us, I said, feeling my voice shake. I wanted to spend time with my grandchildren. I don't get to see them that often. And that's the problem, Irene said, setting the tickets aside on the table. You don't spend enough time with them to know what they like and what they don't like. Chloe's at a difficult age now. She needs space. And Austin. Well, he's 9. He needs activity, not a walk on the beach with an old lady. Every word she said was like a slap in the face. I sat stunned, unable to respond. Besides, Irene continued, Dwight and I rarely get time alone with the kids. Work, things to do. This vacation is our chance for some real family time. But I'm family too, I said. Of course you are, Mom, Dwight rushed to assure me, but his eyes avoided mine. It just might not be the best time. Irene took the tickets from the table and stood up. I'll take them to our safe, she said. I'll call the agency tomorrow to see about an exchange. I stood up too, tears welling up in my eyes. Give me the tickets, Irene. I'll take care of it myself. She shook her head, clutching the envelope to her chest. There's no need to worry, Beatrice. I'll get it all done. After all, I work for a travel agency. But I want to... We'll go without you, Irene cut in, suddenly no longer pretending. The kids don't want you ruining their vacation. And frankly, neither do Dwight and I. I turned to my son, expecting him to stand up for me, to say something, to stop this woman. But he just stood there, eyes downcast, a guilty but determined expression on his face. I'm sorry, Mom, he said quietly. Irene's right. We need this time just for the 4 of us. The champagne remained on the table, unopened. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, feeling my legs go wobbly and a lump in my throat. Okay, I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. Then I'll go. Mom, Dwight took a step toward me. Don't be offended. It's okay, I interrupted him. I understand. But I didn't. Or rather, I was beginning to understand something I should have realized much sooner. I walked out of their house without looking back. It was getting dark outside. I walked without hailing a cab, Despite the aching pain in my knees, I needed time to think, to cool down. But with each step, I felt not a cooling off, but the rising heat of anger. All my life I'd been saving for a rainy day. All my life I'd been saving, taking care of the future. And then I started giving those savings away to my son and his wife who, as it turns out, don't even consider me part of the family. By the time I reached my house, I had a plan. Dwight and Irene had been using me as an ATM all these years. Well, it's time to shut that ATM down. And not just shut down, but block all their cards, all the accounts I have access to. And I have access to a lot of them. Arthur always said, trust but verify. I've trusted my son for 15 years. It was time to see what he could do without my financial support. The door of my house slammed shut behind me. I leaned against it without turning on the hallway light. The darkness seemed appropriate, as black as my thoughts. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to fully realize the depth of my humiliation. I kicked off my shoes, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a whiskey, another rarity. Arthur drank whiskey on special occasions, and I'd kept this bottle after his death. Today was a special occasion, the day I finally saw the truth. With glass in hand, I made my way to the study, the small room Arthur used for paperwork, which I had now turned into my archive. Here, in neat folders, was the entire history of my financial dealings with Dwight and Irene. Turning on the desk lamp, I started pulling out the folders. One by one, they lay on the table, forming a stack that seemed too tall for a simple family relationship. Loan agreements, bank statements, real estate documents, insurance, checks, the evidence of my naivety. I took a sip of whiskey, feeling it burn my throat, and opened the first folder. House. It contained the deeds to Dwight and Irene's house. A 3-bedroom with a spacious living room and the modern kitchen Irene had dreamed of. I remembered the first time they'd shown me the house. Dwight had led me through the rooms with pride, and Irene had discussed what curtains to hang and where to put the antique dresser I'd given them for their wedding. The paperwork for the down payment was a check for 5 zeros, written in my hand. Then another one when they didn't have enough to fix the roof, and another one for updating the plumbing. I remembered each of those conversations. Mom, we could do it on our own, but it's such a difficult time. Beatrice, you realize that children need to grow up in decent conditions. It's an investment, Mom. Real estate is only going up in value. I flipped through the documents further and came across the mortgage agreement. My signature was next to Dwight's. I was a co-borrower. What's more, for the past 3 years, the principal payments had been coming out of my account when Dwight had temporarily run into financial difficulties due to premium reductions at his company. The next folder is automobile, the silver SUV that Irene used to drive the kids to school and go shopping. I remembered how Dwight had called me one day in a panic. Their old car had broken down, and Irene had to take Chloe to an important audition for music school the next day. I agreed to help with the down payment, but the paperwork told a different story. I hadn't just made a down payment, I was a co-borrower on the loan, and the last payments were coming out of my account too. I opened the third folder, education. Private school for Chloe and Austin. Extra music lessons for Chloe. Sports for Austin. Tutoring. Summer camps. All of this was paid for by me because kids are our future, Mom, and education is the best investment. I agree with both statements. But now, looking at these amounts in aggregate, I realize how blind I was. Dwight and Irene were living large at my expense, and I was saving myself to pay for their luxuries. The fourth folder contained bank statements, joint accounts set up while Arthur was still alive for easy management of the family finances. Dwight had been added as a trustee with full access to our accounts. After Arthur's death, I didn't make any changes. I felt it was safer that way. If something happened to me, Dwight could take care of everything. But the discharges showed that the care was going in one direction. Regular transfers from my accounts to Dwight and Irene's accounts, cash withdrawals, credit card payments, buying airline tickets to Europe last summer, a trip I learned about post facto from Irene's social media. They didn't invite me then, and they weren't planning to invite me now. I glanced at the clock, almost midnight. My head was starting to hurt from the numbers and the realization of my stupidity, but I kept going through the documents. I wanted to know the whole truth, to see the full picture. The fifth folder was gifts and loans. Here I kept records of all the large gifts and informal loans I'd given Dwight and Irene. Designer bags for Irene for her birthday, an expensive watch for Dwight for a promotion, a loan for a vacation in Mexico 3 years ago that was never paid back, money for a bathroom remodel, for new living room furniture, for landscaping their backyard. The numbers added up to a shocking sum. If I had all that money left over, I could buy another house just like theirs, or travel the world for 5 years without stopping, or just live without counting every cent when I went to the grocery store. I poured myself another whiskey and leaned back in my chair, remembering all the humiliation I'd endured from them. How Irene had criticized my clothes, my house, my lifestyle. How Dwight had condescended to explain the simplest things to me as if I were out of my mind. How they both avoided inviting me to family events, and if they did, they sat me in a corner, as if I were an insignificant appendage to their perfect family. I thought back to Christmas last year. I'd spent weeks picking out gifts for everyone. For Chloe, specialty sheet music and piano accessories. For Austin, the young scientist kit he'd been talking about for months. For Dwight, an expensive leather briefcase. For Irene, a silk scarf from a brand she kept mentioning. In return, I received a banal gift set of hand cream and a candle. The kind you give to coworkers you're not close to at work. Dwight hadn't even removed the entire price tag, the corner sticking out from under the "Love from All of Us" sticker. That cream still sits in my bathroom unopened, a reminder of how little I mean to them, and today, the final humiliation. We'll fly away without you. The kids don't want you ruining their vacation. Bitterness rose up inside me, mixing with anger. For years, I'd put up with their neglect, making excuses for them, finding explanations for their behavior. They're young, they have their own worries. They have children, they don't have time for me. Modern families live like that, separate from the older generation. But today they crossed the line. They showed that I'm only a source of money for them, not a mother, not a grandmother, not a person with feelings and desires. I stood up, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain. The nighttime Salem was quiet. The lights in the neighboring houses had long since gone out. People were asleep, preparing for a new day. And here I stood, a 67-year-old woman who realized she'd wasted 15 years and most of her savings on people who had nothing but contempt for her. The decision came unexpectedly simply. No drama, no hesitation. I went back to my desk, gathered up all the documents, and neatly put them back in their folders. Then I opened the laptop, Arthur's gift to me before he died. He'd insisted I learn how to use a computer. Times are changing, B. Keep up. I turned on the computer and logged into online banking. The system greeted me by name, and I methodically began checking all the accounts I had access to. Primary account, savings account, investment account, joint accounts with Dwight. All had substantial sums in them, a legacy of a lifetime of working and saving. I took another sip of whiskey and looked at the time, 2 in the morning. Dwight and Irene were probably already asleep, perhaps discussing before bed how they would spend the money from the ticket exchange. Maybe they were planning a trip to a more expensive hotel or a longer stay, without me. I set down my glass and resolutely sprang into action. First, I changed the passwords on all the accounts. Then I blocked access for all additional users, especially Dwight. Then I suspended all automatic payments for their house mortgage, their car loan, their grandchildren's school, Irene's credit cards. Finished with banking, I opened my email and wrote a quick message to my longtime attorney, Nora Price. Dear Nora, I need your advice on several urgent matters. I want to revise my will and clarify my rights to the property my son and his family enjoy. Can you see me tomorrow? It's urgent. Sincerely, Beatrice Holt. I sent the letter, closed the laptop, and for the first time all evening felt something like peace. The decision had been made, the first steps had been taken. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I would meet it ready to fight. Going up to the bedroom, I lay down without changing my clothes. I couldn't sleep. Memories swirled in my head. Dwight at 5 with a broken knee, crying in my arms. Dwight at 12 proudly showing me his school project. Dwight at 21 in his graduation gown, hugging Arthur and me after the ceremony. Dwight at 28, leading a smiling Irene to the wedding. How did we go from those moments to now? I didn't notice the tears rolling down my cheeks. Not bitter tears of resentment, but quiet tears of farewell. Goodbye to the illusions of my family. Hopes of a warm old age surrounded by loving grandchildren. To the image of a son I apparently never really knew. I didn't fall asleep until morning, when the first rays of sunlight began to break through the curtains. I woke up to the ringing of the phone. It was 9 in the morning. It was Nora, my lawyer, answering my letter from the night before. Beatrice, it's Nora. I got your letter. Of course I can see you today. Is everything all right? Her voice sounded worried. We'd known each other for more than 20 years, ever since Arthur and I wrote our first wills. Not really, Nora, I answered, sitting up in bed. I have a lot to tell you and a lot to ask you. What time is convenient for you? I can make time at 11 o'clock. Would that work? Perfect. I'll be at your place at 11. I hung up the phone and stood up. My head was a little sore from last night's whiskey and lack of sleep, but I was still determined. I showered, dressed, ate breakfast, and sat down at my laptop to check my bank accounts in the daylight. All the changes made during the night were still in effect. Dwight's accounts were locked. Automatic payments were suspended. The phone was silent. They didn't know yet. Perhaps still asleep or too busy planning their family vacation without me. They would find out soon enough. At 10:30, I hailed a cab to Nora's office in downtown Salem, took all the file folders with me, my dossier on years of financial abuse. Today I would learn what I could do legally to regain control of my life and my money. The cab pulled up right on time. The elderly driver helped me load my files into the trunk and opened the door for me. Where are we going, ma'am? Price and Associates on Essex Street, I said, getting into the back seat. The car started, and I looked out the window at my house. The house where I'd lived for almost half a century, where I raised my son, where I buried my husband. A house full of memories, not all of which were happy ones, especially in recent years. Maybe it was time for a change here, too. Maybe after I dealt with Dwight and Irene, I should consider moving? About a new beginning somewhere without painful memories? The thought didn't cause panic like it might have even yesterday. Yesterday, I clung to the past, to family ties, no matter how toxic they were. Today, I was ready to look to the future. My own future, without the people who thought of me as nothing more than a convenient ATM machine. The cab stopped in front of an elegant red brick building. The driver helped me with my files again, and I entered the cool lobby of the law firm. The receptionist recognized me and smiled. Good morning, Mrs. Holt. Ms. Price is expecting you. Please come in. I walked down the familiar corridor to Nora's office. She was waiting for me in the doorway, a tall, slender woman about my age, with close-cropped gray hair and shrewd eyes behind stylish glasses. Beatrice, she hugged me, then pulled away, studying my face. You look determined. I am, I nodded, entering her office and placing the folders on her desk. I have a lot of questions, Nora, and I need honest answers. She sat down at her desk and gestured for me to sit across from her. I'm all ears. I took a deep breath and began my story. About the years of financial support. About not being recognized. About last night's ticket incident. About the night's financial maneuvers. Nora listened without interrupting, only occasionally making notes in her notebook. When I finished, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Are you sure you want to go this way, Beatrice? It could lead to a complete breakdown in your relationship with your son. That relationship no longer exists, Nora, I answered firmly. There is only the financial dependence, which I intend to end. So yes, I'm sure. Now tell me, what can I do legally to regain control of my estate? Nora nodded, put her glasses back on, and reached for the folders. Let's see what you've got here. The meeting with Nora lasted almost 3 hours. We went through every document, every contract, every account statement. To my relief, my position was stronger than I had anticipated. You see, Beatrice, Nora explained, setting aside the mortgage agreement, legally, you have every right to stop making payments on the house mortgage. You're a co-borrower, not a donor. If the payments don't keep coming, the bank will start foreclosure proceedings. And the house will be auctioned off? Not necessarily. You can buy out Dwight's share if you can, or you could initiate a foreclosure sale and split the proceeds in proportion to everyone's contribution. I nodded, making a mental note. And the car? The car is even easier. You're a co-borrower on the car loan, and according to these statements, you've actually been making all the payments for the past 2 years. You can contact the car dealership and the lending institution and explain the situation. Worst case scenario, they will repossess the car for non-payment. At best, you can reissue the loan to yourself and become the sole owner of the car. What about the bank accounts? You had the right to block joint accounts and cancel automatic payments. It's your money, Beatrice. You don't have to support a grown son and his family. When we were done, I had a clear plan of action. Nora also helped me draft a new will that gave most of my assets to charitable organizations, not Dwight. Think about it again, she warned me. A will can always be changed if you two reconcile. I don't think that's going to happen, I replied. But okay, I'll think about it. I returned home at dusk, tired but with a clear head and a clear plan. My phone, which had been in my bag all day, showed 12 missed calls from Dwight. Not a single text message. He'd obviously discovered something was wrong, but didn't want to leave evidence in the form of a text. I ignored the calls and decided to spend the evening quietly. I took a bath, made some tea, and sat with a book by the window. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my life. My house was quiet and peaceful, without a shadow of guilt or worry about what Dwight would think or Irene would say. In the morning, I was awakened by the phone ringing. The clock read 7:30. I looked at the screen, Dwight. I took a deep breath and answered it. Yes, Mom? His voice sounded on the verge of panic. What's going on? We're at the airport and our cards aren't working. All our accounts are blocked. We can't pay for our luggage. We can't even buy a cup of coffee. I sat up in bed, feeling strangely calm. Good morning, Dwight. Yes, I blocked the accounts. There was a pause, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You what? Why? Mom, we're stuck at the airport with the kids. How are we supposed to fly? How are you going to fly without me? I asked in an even voice. That's what you were planning, wasn't it? Fly to Hawaii on money I earned without me because I'm ruining the vacation? You heard that? He began, then changed tactics. Mom, that's not what Irene meant. That's exactly what she meant, Dwight, I interrupted him. And you know it, you both know it. You're using me as an ATM and I've decided to shut that ATM down. In the background, I could hear Irene's voice demanding that Dwight hand her the phone. Then her harsh voice broke into the conversation. Beatrice, what kind of games are you playing? We're standing at the airport with 2 kids. Austin's crying. Chloe's hysterical. Do you realize what you're doing? I know exactly what I'm doing, Irene, I answered calmly. I'm taking steps to regain control of my finances. The money you're so used to spending is my money. The money Arthur and I have been saving all our lives. And I'm no longer going to sponsor people who don't consider me part of the family. That's ridiculous, Irene exclaimed. We've always considered you part of the family. It's just that this time we only wanted to spend time with the kids. That's fine. Is it normal not to invite the person who paid for the trip? I asked. Is it okay to say the kids don't want me to ruin their vacation? Is that your idea of family, Irene? She was silent for a moment. Then her tone changed from aggressive to pleading. Beatrice, look, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. But now we're stuck here with no money, with the kids. Please unlock the accounts, at least one of them. We can discuss everything when we get back. You're not stuck, Irene, I replied. You have options. You can take a cab home, or ask one of your friends to lend you money, or use a credit card that I don't control. I'm sure you have one of those. Mom, Dwight intervened again, apparently taking the phone from Irene. Please, we can't just go back like this. The tickets are non-refundable. Tickets that I paid for, I reminded him, and which Irene had so confidently taken back yesterday, saying she'd handle the exchange. Let her handle it. But the kids. You should have thought of the children sooner, I said, feeling my voice harden. When you let Irene say I was ruining their vacations, when you didn't bring them to me for months, when you stood by and kept quiet while your wife humiliated your mother. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Dwight spoke in a low voice. What do you want, Mom? I want you to handle this on your own, Dwight, without my money, without my support. You're a grown man with a job and a family. It's time you learn to live within your means. And you're just going to leave us here, with the kids? You decided to go without me, remember? Now you decide how you want to proceed. It's called consequences of choice, Dwight. Adults face them all the time. I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of emotions, sad that it had come to this, but also satisfied that I'd finally told the truth. The phone rang again almost immediately. I didn't answer it. Then it rang again. And then another. I muted the sound and put the phone aside. I had other plans today. After breakfast, I dialed the number of the car dealership where the loan for Dwight's car had been arranged. The loan manager, Mr. Patterson, was surprised by my call. "Mrs. Holt, is something wrong with the payments?" "Not exactly, Mr. Patterson. I'd like to discuss a situation with a car loan that I'm co-borrowing on with my son, Dwight Holt. I explained that I will no longer be making payments on this loan and I want to learn about my options." "Well," he said thoughtfully, "if the payments stop, the car could be repossessed. But since you are a co-borrower and can prove that you have been making most of the payments, we can consider reissuing the loan to you. Of course, it would require your son's consent." "And if I don't have your son's consent?" "Then I'm afraid the only option is to stop making payments and wait for the car to be repossessed for non-payment. That would negatively affect the credit history of both co-borrowers." "My credit history at my age?" I chuckled involuntarily. "I don't think that's a serious problem, Mr. Patterson." We agreed that I would write a formal statement stopping payments on my part, and the car dealership would contact Dwight to discuss the next steps. The next call was to the real estate agency. I had worked with Ellen Moss when I bought this house 30 years ago and had maintained a friendly relationship with her. She was surprised to hear from me. "Beatrice, you've decided to sell the house? At your age, moving can be difficult." "Not my house, Ellen. It's my son's, the one at 27 Maple Drive." There was a pause. "But doesn't Dwight own that house?" "Legally, we both own it." "I'm the co-borrower on the mortgage and the down payment, and I've made all the payments for the last 3 years." Ellen whistled. "Okay, and you want to sell it? Against Dwight's wishes?" "I want to know my options, Ellen. Can I initiate the sale as a co-borrower? Or do I have to buy out his share first?" She explained that the situation was complicated, but that there were options. We agreed to meet the next day to discuss everything in detail and look at the paperwork. After Ellen's call, I decided to go out for a walk. The day was clear and warm, typical for Salem this time of year. I walked down familiar streets, past the houses of neighbors with whom I had hardly spoken to in recent years. All my attention was focused on Dwight and his family, and my own life took a back seat. When I got home, there were 7 new messages on my answering machine. I listened to the first one, Dwight begging me to call him back. The second was Irene, whose tone changed from pleading to threatening. I deleted the others without listening. Instead, I decided to tend to the garden. I put on gloves, grabbed the garden shears, and went out into the backyard. The rose bushes Arthur and I had planted 20 years ago needed pruning. I methodically cut away the wilted blossoms, making room for new buds. Working in the garden always calmed me. Here, among the plants, everything was simple and clear. Care brought visible results, not like relationships with people, especially family. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a car approaching. Peering out from behind the hedge, I saw a cab with Dwight, Irene, and the kids getting out. They looked exhausted and annoyed. Dwight was carrying 2 suitcases, Irene was holding the hand of a crying Austin, and Chloe was walking behind them, staring at her phone. I didn't rush to meet them. I kept trimming the roses, waiting for them to notice me. "Mom!" Dwight walked quickly to the fence, leaving his suitcases on the sidewalk. "We've been calling you all day. I've been busy," I said, keeping my eyes on my work. "Busy?" His voice shook with indignation. "We're stuck at the airport with no money. With the kids! We had to borrow from random people for a cab home." "How does that feel, Dwight?" I finally looked at him. "Being helpless? Depend on other people's kindness?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to find an answer. "Beatrice!" Irene came over to the hedge, dragging a still sobbing Austin behind her. "What have you done? We've lost the money for the tickets, the children are upset, Good afternoon, Irene," I interrupted her. "How was the flight you planned without me?" She fell silent as if struck by lightning, then her face contorted with anger. "You did it out of spite. Because of what I said yesterday? It's childish. Think of the children." "The children?" I put down my scissors and took off my gloves. "You mean the kids you haven't brought to me in months? The ones who supposedly don't want me to ruin their vacation?" "Grandma?" Austin's voice interrupted our argument. He stood looking at me with big eyes still red from crying. Are you mad at us? My heart clenched. I squatted down so I was level with him. No, sweetie. I'm not mad at you or Chloe. I'm upset with your parents. Adults fight sometimes, you know? He nodded uncertainly. Chloe, finally getting off the phone, came closer. Is it because of Hawaii? She asked bluntly. Because Mom said you weren't coming with us? I looked at my granddaughter, noting how mature she'd become over the past year. 12 years old is not a child, but not yet a teenager. The age when you start to notice adult games. Partly, I answered honestly. But it's not just about the trip. It's about the way your parents have treated me over the past few years. Chloe, Austin, Irene intervened. Go inside. We need to talk to Grandma alone. The children reluctantly obeyed, picking up their backpacks and heading toward the house. When they had gotten a good distance away, Irene turned to me, her face contorted with rage. You have no right to drag the children into our disagreement, she hissed. I was only answering Chloe's question, I countered. Unlike you, I don't lie to my grandchildren. That's enough, Dwight interjected. Mom, let's talk like adults. What's going on? Why did you block the accounts? What are you trying to prove? I don't want to prove anything, Dwight, I said calmly. I'm just taking what's mine. My money, my control over my life. And I didn't just block the accounts. I stopped making payments on your house mortgage and your car loan. And I'm in discussions with my realtor about selling the house. Their faces became so stunned that in another situation I would have laughed. You can't do that, Dwight exclaimed. This is our house. The house I paid for, I reminded him. I made the down payment. I've been paying the mortgage for the last 3 years. Legally, I have as much right to it as you do. And I'm not going to pay for a house with people who think I'm a burden. Beatrice. Irene tried to change tactics, her voice turning honeyed. I overreacted yesterday. Of course you're part of the family. Of course we want you around. It's just, we were all tired, the kids were cranky, I said something I didn't mean. Really? I raised an eyebrow. What about all the other times, Irene? When you criticized my clothes, my house, my lifestyle? When you told the kids that Grandma was old-fashioned and didn't understand modern life? Were those random reservations too? She turned pale. Dwight looked like he'd been kicked in the butt. Mom, we can talk about this, he began. But please unblock at least one account. We need something to live on. You have a job, Dwight, I reminded him. Use your paycheck like every other adult does. But it's not enough. We have a mortgage, a car, the kids' school. Exactly. All these years you've been living beyond your means at my expense. It's time you learn to live within your means. I turned to go into the house. And also, I added, looking over my shoulder, I'm meeting with a realtor tomorrow. I suggest you start looking for rental housing that you can afford. I hadn't slept all night after meeting Dwight and Irene. Their faces, contorted with shock and anger, were in front of me every time I closed my eyes. At some point, I began to doubt. Maybe I was being too cruel. Maybe I should have talked to them before taking such drastic measures. But then I remembered Irene's cold look as she spoke. We'll fly away without you. I remembered how Dwight had remained silent, not speaking up for me. How they'd taken advantage of my generosity for years without showing an ounce of gratitude. And my resolve was returning. In the morning, I got up early, despite the sleepless night. I ate breakfast, drank 2 cups of strong coffee, and began preparing for my meeting with Ellen, the realtor. I pulled out all the paperwork for Dwight's house, the deed, the mortgage agreement, the receipts. Ellen arrived at 10 sharp. She was always punctual. We sat down at the kitchen table and I laid out the documents in front of her. It's a complicated situation, Beatrice, she said, looking at the papers. Yes, you're a co-borrower and you've made a large portion of the payments, but it would be difficult to initiate a sale without Dwight's consent. It would require a court order to divide the property. What are you suggesting? I asked. First, we should try to work things out amicably. Offer Dwight to buy your share or agree to the sale. If he refuses, then go to court. We discussed our options, and Ellen promised to prepare an appraisal of the market value of the house. When she left, I sat in a chair by the window, looking out at my garden. Yesterday, I hadn't finished pruning the roses because of the arrival of Dwight and his family. Today, the weather favored gardening again, but I wasn't in the mood. Around noon, the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood Dwight, alone, without Irene and the kids. He looked gaunt, with shadows under his eyes. He looked like he'd had a sleepless night, too. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded and stepped aside, letting him into the house. We walked into the kitchen where I poured us both coffee. Dwight sat at the table, fiddling with his cup, but he didn't drink. "Mom," he finally began, "I came here to talk. A serious talk." "I'm listening," I replied, sitting down across from him. He took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "What you're doing, it's too much. You want to punish us, I understand. Irene and I have been ungrateful. But taking away our home, our car, leaving us without money? Think of the children, Mom." "I am thinking about the kids, Dwight," I said calmly. "And I'm thinking about me, too. All these years I've given you my money, hoping it would strengthen our family. But instead, you've become more and more distant, using me as an ATM, nothing more." "That's not true," he countered, but without much conviction. "No? Then why did Irene say I was ruining the kids' vacation? Why didn't you bring them to me for months? Why did every visit end with you asking for money?" Dwight lowered his eyes, unable to find an answer. "We didn't mean for this to happen," he said finally. "It's just that life is hard. Expenses, work, kids. We're used to relying on you for help." "Too used to it," I said. "So much so that we've forgotten about gratitude, respect, that I'm a human being with feelings too, not just a source of funding." At that moment, the door swung open and Irene flew into the kitchen. Her face was red with anger, her hair disheveled. It looked like Dwight hadn't told her he was coming to see me, and somehow she'd found out and followed him. "So that's where you are," she exclaimed, looking at her husband. Then she turned to me. "What is it, Beatrice? Are you trying to win him to your side? Turn him against me?" "Irene, calm down." Dwight stood up, trying to take her hand, but she yanked it away. "No, I will not calm down." Her voice rose an octave. "This woman is trying to destroy our family, to leave us homeless, without a livelihood." "That woman is my mother," Dwight reminded her, but Irene wasn't listening. "You think this is funny?" She turned to me, pointing her finger. "Playing with our lives? With children's lives? Chloe has been crying all night. Austin is asking why Grandma doesn't love us anymore. Leave the kids out of this, Irene." I kept my composure, even though I was seething inside. "This is between us adults." "No, this is between all of us." She came closer, hovering over me. "You want to take away our house? The car? Please, but then you'll never see your grandchildren again. Never. I'll take care of it." "Irene!" Dwight grabbed her by the shoulders, pulling her back. "What are you talking about?" "The truth!" She broke free of his grip. "If she wants a war, she'll get one. We'll move. We'll get out of Salem, someplace where she can't get us." I watched the scene with a strange detachment, like I was watching a theatrical production instead of real life. Irene's hysterics seemed excessive, insincere, as if she were playing the role of an aggrieved mother instead of really worrying about her children. "Sit down, Irene," I said quietly but firmly, "and listen to me." Something in my tone made her obey. She sat down across from me, still breathing hard with anger. Dwight sank into the chair beside her, looking completely confused. "I'm not going to take your house away from you right now," I began, "or your car, or deprive you of your resources completely. I just want you to realize how much you depend on me financially, and how ungrateful you've been all these years." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "In the last 15 years since Arthur died, I've spent over $500,000 on you. Down payment on the house, roof repairs, a new kitchen, a car, private school for the kids, extra classes, vacations. That's not counting the regular transfers to your accounts when you were short of a paycheck." Irene opened her mouth to object, but I raised my hand, stopping her. I wasn't done. All these years I've lived modestly, saved on myself. Didn't travel, even though I'd always dreamed of seeing the world. Didn't update my closet. I didn't renovate my house because all the money went to you. And what did I get in return? Neglect, mockery, rare visits from your grandchildren, and then only when you needed the money. I looked right into Irene's eyes. And now you're threatening to cut me off from my grandchildren? Communication that's barely existed? Is that your idea of family, Irene? Of mutual respect, gratitude? She looked away, looking embarrassed for the first time. I have a suggestion, I continued, addressing both of them now. You can keep the house and the car, but from now on, you pay for them yourself. No more money from me, no more gifts, no more financial support. You live on what you earn. But we can't, Dwight began. My paycheck isn't enough to. Then sell the house, I interrupted him. Buy something cheaper, or rent an apartment, sell the car, buy a more economical model, move the kids to public school. Live within your means, like all other people do. You want us to become paupers, Irene hissed. I want you to become self-sufficient, I corrected. And another thing. If you want to maintain a relationship with me, if you want me to be a part of the children's lives, you're going to have to change. No more neglect, no more ridicule, no more using me as an ATM machine. I took a sip of coffee, giving them time to consider my words. There is another option, I added. You pay me back all the money I've spent on you over the years, every dollar, with interest. Then we'll be even, and you can live as you wish, without my interference. That's impossible, Dwight exclaimed. We don't have that kind of money. Then you'll have to take the first option, I said calmly, and learn to live within your means. Irene looked at me with hatred. You're doing this out of revenge, she said, because I didn't want to take you to Hawaii. No, Irene, I shook my head. Hawaii was just the last straw. I'm doing this because I've put up with your neglect and ingratitude for 15 years, because I'm tired of being nothing but a source of money for you, because I want to take back control of my life and my finances. Dwight looked lost. He looked back and forth at me and Irene, clearly not knowing which side to take. Mom, he finally said, give us time, at least a month, to sort out the finances, to find some extra income, please. I thought about it. A month was a reasonable amount of time. In that time, they could start looking for more affordable housing if they decided to sell the house, or find a way to increase their income. Okay, I agreed. 1 month. I'll unblock one account so you can cover your current expenses, but no more than that. And in a month, I expect a concrete plan of action from you. Thank you, Dwight exhaled, clearly relieved. Irene was silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. I could see that she wasn't resigned, that new plans and strategies were already forming in her head. But I didn't care about that anymore. I had said my word. Now, I think you should go. I got up from the table. I need to finish the roses in the garden. Dwight got up too, pulling Irene with him. We'll talk to the kids, he said. We'll explain the situation to them. Maybe we could bring them to you this weekend. That would be nice, I nodded, not really believing that promise. When they left, I went back to the garden. The air was fresh from the night's rain, and the roses smelled sweet and delicate. I put on my gloves and picked up my scissors, returning to the work I had interrupted yesterday. Each cut wilted flower seemed like a symbol. I was getting rid of an old, painful relationship, making room for a new one. Maybe not as close as I dreamed, but healthier, based on mutual respect, not financial dependence. That evening, I got a call from Ellen. Beatrice, I have a preliminary appraisal on Dwight's house. Based on the current real estate market in Salem, it's worth about $600,000. If you decide to sell, you'll have about $350,000 left after you pay off the remaining mortgage. Considering you made a down payment and have been paying the mortgage for the last few years, you're entitled to at least half that amount. Thank you, Ellen, I said. I gave Dwight a month to get his finances in order. We'll see what happens next. That's a smart move, she said. Keep me posted. After I talked to Ellen, I sat in the living room going through old photo albums. Here was Dwight at 5, smiling, missing a front tooth. Here he is at 10, proudly holding his first bike. Here's his high school graduation, Arthur and I standing side by side, so happy, so proud. When did everything change? When did my loving son turn into a man who lets his wife humiliate his mother, who sees me only as a source of money? Maybe after Arthur died, or even earlier when I started spoiling him, fulfilling his every wish without asking for anything in return. The next morning, waking up earlier than usual, I decided to keep my promise and unlock one of Dwight's accounts. I chose the one with the least amount of money in it, enough for running expenses, but not for luxuries. Then I called my bank manager and explained the situation, asking him to set a limit on daily withdrawals from that account. I wasn't about to give Irene the opportunity to empty the account on the first day. Around noon, Dwight called. Mom, thanks for unblocking the account, but, there's a withdrawal limit. Yes, I confirmed. $500 a day. That should be enough for groceries and other necessities. But we have a credit card payment, he began. Dwight, I interrupted him. I said I'd give you a month to get your finances straightened out. That doesn't mean I'm going to keep paying off your credit cards and other debts. Learn to live within your means. He sighed. Okay, we're trying. Irene's already talked to the school principal about the possibility of moving the kids to a scholarship program, and I'm looking for a part-time weekend job. That's a good start, I said, softening a little. Maybe they really are trying. And we'll bring the kids in on Saturday, he added, if that's okay with you. Of course I don't mind. I'll be waiting. After talking to Dwight, I felt a slight thrill. Are they really changing? Or is this just another manipulation to get access to my money? Time would tell. That evening of the same day, there was a knock on my door. I opened it and saw Irene, alone, without Dwight and the kids. She looked different than usual, modestly dressed, no makeup, her hair in a simple ponytail. Beatrice, she said quietly, may I come in? I wanted to talk to you, alone. I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was another tantrum or a scene of manipulation. But something in her eyes, tiredness, maybe even remorse, made me back down and let her into the house. We sat down in the living room, and I offered her tea, which she accepted gratefully. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Then Irene spoke. I came to apologize, she said, looking into her cup rather than at me. For yesterday, for the way I spoke to you, and for everything else, for the years. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. It was the first time Irene had ever apologized to me, for anything. You're right, she continued. We used you, used to your help, took it for granted, and I was ungrateful, arrogant. I looked down on you, even though everything we have is because of you. She finally looked up, and I saw tears in her eyes. Dwight doesn't know I'm here. He wouldn't approve. He thinks we need to let you guys cool off. But I realized I had to say it. I had to admit my guilt. Why now, Irene? I asked. Because I shut off the money tap? She cringed at my words, but nodded. Partly, when you blocked the accounts, I realized how dependent we were on you. It was a sobering moment. But it's not just about the money. Yesterday, when I threatened to cut you off from your grandchildren, I saw the pain in your eyes. Real pain. And I realized I was doing the same thing my mother did to me. That confession surprised me. Irene had never talked about her family, and I had never asked. My mother, she continued, used me as a weapon against my father after their divorce. She forbade him to see me if he didn't give her money, if he didn't fulfill her demands. I hated her for it. And now I'm doing the same thing, using the kids as leverage. She wiped a tear that rolled down her cheek. I don't want to be like that, Beatrice. I don't want my children to see me as the monster I saw my mother as. I don't want them to grow up and turn their backs on me like I turned my back on her. I sat stunned by this confession. In all the years I'd known Irene, she'd never shown such vulnerability, such honesty. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. And I'm not asking for the money back. I just want you to know that I know I was wrong, and I will try to change. For the kids, for Dwight. And maybe someday you won't see me as the enemy, but as part of the family. She stood up, setting her tea down on the table. I gotta go. Dwight will be worried. Thank you for listening. I got up too. Irene, I said, surprised by my own words. I appreciate your honesty. And yes, I hope you'll change, for the sake of the children, for the sake of all of us. She nodded, smiled weakly, and headed for the door. On the threshold, she turned around. We're really bringing the kids in on Saturday, she said. They miss you, though they don't always show it. When she left, I went back into the living room and sat down, trying to make sense of this unexpected visit. Was Irene sincere? Or was this just another manipulation? Would she really be able to change? Or would she revert to her old behavior once she had access to my money? I didn't know the answers to these questions. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that perhaps my actions had not only protected my finances, but also offered a chance for healing for our family. But I immediately restrained myself. No, I would not fall for these tricks. Too many times I have believed promises that were not kept. Too many times I've forgiven things that didn't deserve forgiveness. This time they would have to prove their sincerity with actions, not words. I looked at the picture of Arthur standing on the mantelpiece. He was smiling his reserved smile, as if he knew some secret he didn't want to share. "What would you do if you were me, Art?" I asked aloud, even though I knew I wouldn't get an answer. But deep down, I knew. Arthur had always been a practical, rational man. He would say, "Trust but verify, B." And remember, money can't buy sincere love and respect. The 3 months flew by. The leaves on the trees in my garden changed color from bright green to golden red, and then fell, covering the ground with a mottled carpet. Salem was always beautiful in the fall, but this year I noticed its beauty especially acutely, as if I were seeing the city anew. A lot had changed in those 3 months. After my ultimatum, Dwight and Irene moved out of the house on Maple Drive. Not right away, of course. At first, they tried to find ways to stay, offering various options. They'd pay my rent, they'd take on extra work, they'd cut costs. But in the end, reality took its toll. Dwight's salary wasn't enough for the mortgage, house maintenance, and all the other expenses they were used to. They found a small 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs of Salem, much more modest than their previous home, but decent enough. Chloe and Austin shared one room, which caused constant conflict, especially given their age difference. Irene took a full-time job at her travel agency instead of her previous part-time job. The kids switched from private school to public school, a painful adjustment, especially for Chloe. I didn't sell the house on Maple Drive as I'd originally planned. After much discussion with Nora and Ellen, I decided to keep it. I bought out Dwight's share a modest sum, considering how much of the mortgage payment I'd made, and became a full owner, not to live there myself. My old house on Oak Street was nicer and more comfortable, but as an investment. Ellen found reliable tenants, a young doctor couple with a young child who signed a long-term lease. The monthly rent more than covered the remaining mortgage and brought in extra income. As for Dwight's car, things worked out more easily. After the payments stopped, the bank contacted him directly. Dwight didn't have the means to continue making payments, so the car had to be repossessed. Now he and Irene used public transportation or a used sedan they bought with some of the money they received from the sale of their share of the house. My financial situation improved dramatically once I stopped sponsoring Dwight and his family. For the first time in 15 years, I could spend money on myself without feeling guilty or the need to save money on every little thing. The first thing I did was update my closet. I bought a few elegant dresses, comfortable shoes, a new coat for winter. Nothing flashy or fancy. I always preferred classic style, but quality things that made me feel confident. Then I did some renovations to the house. Small but refreshing, new wallpaper in the living room, new tiles in the bathroom, new kitchen appliances. Arthur always said that the kitchen is the heart of the home, and my kitchen deserved a good cardiologist. But the most significant change was my return to a social life. For years, I had been focused only on Dwight and his family, forgetting my own interests and friendships. Now that has changed. I joined the Salem Gardening Club, a group of enthusiastic gardeners who met twice a week to share experiences, seeds, and seedlings. My roses had always been my pride, but at the club I learned about many other plants that could enhance my garden. I met some interesting people, mostly my age, but there were also some young people with a passion for organic gardening and ecological methods. I became especially close to Audrey Andrews, a 71-year-old widow who lives 3 blocks away. She, like me, had lost her husband a few years earlier and also had a difficult relationship with her children. We quickly found common ground and soon began to spend not only club meetings together, but evenings over tea, discussing books, movies, and life. "You know, Beatrice," Audrey told me one day as we sat in her cozy living room, "I never thought I'd find a real friend at my age. Most of my old friends have either moved closer to their children or, alas, have left this world. And my children are too busy with their own affairs to visit me regularly. I understand, I nodded. My situation was a little different. My son and his family visited me regularly, but only when they needed money. I'm not sure it's any better. Audrey laughed, but there was no anger in her laugh. You and I are two sides of the same coin, darling. I've been ignored, you've been used. But you know what? We're getting by, and frankly, we're doing pretty well. She was right. I was doing fine, and surprisingly better than I expected. Relationships with Dwight and his family remained strained, but not completely severed. They brought the kids to see me about once a month, not as often as I'd hoped, but more often than before. Chloe and Austin were slowly adjusting to the new situation. At first, they were embarrassed and even blamed me a little. Apparently, they had heard something from their parents. But over time, our meetings became more relaxed. I didn't discuss with them the financial differences with their parents. Instead, we spent time playing board games, cooking, gardening. I helped Chloe with her music lessons. She now took them at the community center rather than from an expensive private teacher, and taught Austin the basics of chess, a game Arthur had once loved. Irene kept a detached demeanor during these visits, but was no longer openly hostile. Dwight seemed lost, as if he couldn't decide whether to be angry with me or seek reconciliation. I didn't push him, giving him time to make up his own mind. I didn't help them financially anymore, despite the occasional hints. Once a week, I cooked them a big home-cooked meal, casseroles, stews, soups, that Dwight would pick up when he dropped off or picked up the kids. It was my compromise, not money but caring expressed in a practical way. And so 3 months after our breakup, on a cloudy November day, Dwight showed up on my doorstep alone, without the kids or Irene. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble he hadn't shaved in days. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I come in? I need to talk to you." I let him into the house, noting his shabby appearance and nervous movements. We walked into the kitchen, where I was just making pumpkin soup, an old recipe of my mother's, perfect for cold weather. "Do you want coffee?" I asked, pointing to a chair. He nodded, sitting down and drumming his fingers nervously on the table. I put a cup of freshly brewed coffee in front of him and sat across from him, waiting for him to start talking. "I got fired," he finally said, not looking me in the eye. "Yesterday. Downsizing. 30% of the staff. I was one of them." "I'm sorry, Dwight," I said sincerely. Despite our differences, I didn't want my son to suffer. "I've already sent out resumes," he continued, "and I have a severance package, but it won't last long. Rent, bills, the kids' school, even public school has expenses. Textbooks, field trips, sports equipment." He finally looked up at me, and I saw a familiar expression in his eyes, a mixture of guilt and anticipation. The same look he'd come to me all those years ago when he needed money. "Mom, I know we've had a lot of complications, but right now, I'm really in a bind. If we can't pay the rent, we'll be evicted. The kids will have to change schools again, change friends. What do you want from me, Dwight?" I asked him bluntly, even though I already knew the answer. He sighed, gathering his thoughts. "I need financial help, temporary, just until I find a new job. I'll pay back every dime, I promise." I sipped my coffee, considering his words. "What does Irene say? Is she still working at the travel agency?" "Yeah, but her salary won't cover all her expenses, especially now in the off-season. Few people plan trips in November." I nodded, understanding the situation. It was indeed a difficult one. But I also remembered all the conversations we'd had before, all the promises that hadn't been kept. "Mom," Dwight leaned forward, "the kids have been asking about you, especially Austin. He misses your chess games." There it was, using the grandkids as leverage, exactly as I expected. "They can come visit me any time, Dwight," I replied calmly. "My door is always open to them." "But we don't even have the money for gas to bring them right now," he exclaimed, and there was desperation in his voice. "Mom, please, for the sake of the children. They shouldn't have to suffer because of our differences." I looked at my son, at his gaunt face, at the worry in his eyes. Part of me wanted to help him, to protect him as I had done all his life. But the other part remembered years of neglect, of ridicule, of being used. "Dwight," I began slowly, choosing my words, I sympathize with your situation. I do. Losing a job is hard, especially when you have a family. He nodded, hope in his eyes. But I can't give you money, I continued. Not because I'm vindictive or because I want you to suffer. It would be a step backward for both of us. We'd be back to the same unhealthy relationship where I'm the ATM and you're the eternal debtor. The hope in his eyes faded, replaced by disappointment. Then what? You're just going to let us be homeless? Your own grandchildren? No, Dwight, I said firmly. I'm offering to help in other ways. I can pick up the kids from school and watch them while you and Irene are at work or on job interviews. I can cook dinners for you to cut down on groceries. I can help you write your resume and prepare for interviews. But I won't give you any money. He stood up, clenching his fist. That's not help, he exclaimed. These are empty gestures. We need money, Mom. Real help. Real help, I said, standing up too, is to teach you to stand on your own 2 feet, to find solutions on your own instead of running to me every time you have a problem. I thought you loved us. His voice shook with resentment. But you just like to see us in distress. This is your revenge, isn't it? For not appreciating you before? No, Dwight. I shook my head. It's not revenge. It's an attempt to change the dynamic of our relationship, to help you be stronger, more independent. Because I won't always be around to solve your problems. He stared at me for a few long seconds, then turned and headed for the door. The kids aren't coming this weekend, he tossed over his shoulder. We don't have the money for that. I hope you're happy with your decision. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my coffee half drunk and a heavy feeling in my heart. I knew I'd done the right thing, but that didn't make it any less painful. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, thinking about Dwight, about my grandchildren, about the future of our family. My refusal to help with money could have ruined our relationship forever, but continued financial support would only reinforce the unhealthy dynamic I was trying to change. In the morning, I made a decision. I couldn't control Dwight and Irene's actions, their treatment of me, their decision to bring or not bring the kids. But I could control my own life, and there was something I had wanted to do for a long time. I called a travel agency, not the one where Irene worked, but another one downtown. Talked to an agent about a trip to Hawaii. A single room at the same Wailea Beach Hotel on Maui, where I'd planned to stay with Dwight's family 3 months ago. When would you like to fly, Mrs. Holt? The agent asked. At the end of January, I replied. 2 weeks. It was cold and gray in Salem in the winter, and it was eternal summer in Hawaii. The perfect time to escape the cold, both physically and emotionally. Once everything was booked and paid for, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not joy, of which I was incapable after talking to Dwight, but a quiet confidence that I was moving in the right direction. I continued to call Dwight in the following weeks, offering to help with the kids, with food, with finding a job. He rarely answered, and if he did, it was brief and cold. I hadn't seen my grandchildren since the day I'd turned him down for money. Irene called once, trying to convince me to change my mind, but I remained adamant. She stopped contacting me after that, too. I missed the kids, especially the quiet conversations with Chloe and Austin's enthusiasm when he was learning a new move in chess. But I had faith that things would change with time. Dwight would find a new job. Their financial situation would stabilize, and maybe they would realize that my love for them wasn't measured in dollars. As time went on, I tended to my garden despite the cold, preparing plants for winter, covering the more tender specimens, planting spring plantings, spent evenings with Audrey and other new friends from the garden club, reading books I'd been putting off for years, watched movies I'd only heard about, living my life, not the life of Dwight and his family, and I was getting ready to go to Hawaii. I bought new summer dresses, a wide-brimmed straw hat to protect me from the sun, comfortable sandals for walking on the beach. I studied guidebooks, choosing excursions and places I wanted to visit. I imagined how I would sit on the beach, looking at the endless ocean, listening to the sound of the waves, feeling the warm sand under my feet. On the day of departure, I got up early. I packed the last of my things, checked my tickets and documents, and locked up the house. The cab was due in half an hour to take me to the Boston airport. I was sitting in a chair by the window, looking out at my conservatory, when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. It was too early for a cab. I looked out and saw Dwight's familiar used sedan. Chloe and Austin got out, followed by Dwight. Irene stayed in the car. I opened the door, surprised and a little alarmed by their unexpected visit. Grandma? Austin rushed over to me, hugging me around the waist. We missed you. I missed you too, honey, I replied, hugging him back and looking at Dwight with a mute question. The kids wanted to see you before you left, he said, avoiding a direct look. They heard from Audrey that you were going to Hawaii today. Oh, Audrey. Apparently she'd mentioned my trip when Dwight happened to meet her in town. Are you bringing us seashells? Austin asked. And pictures of dolphins? I will, I promised, touched by his enthusiasm. And maybe I'll even learn to play the ukulele to show you when I get back. Chloe, who had been holding back a little, finally came closer. I'm happy for you, Grandma, she said with a slight smile. You deserve to rest. My heart squeezed at those simple but sincere words. In her 12 years, she understood more than many adults. Thank you, sweetheart. I hugged her, feeling her tense for a moment, then relax in my arms. Dwight stood in the distance, watching us with an unreadable expression on his face. When the kids stepped back to look at my suitcases, he moved closer. I found a job, he said quietly. Not as good as the old one, but it's a start. We're getting by. No thanks to you, but we're doing okay. There was still resentment in his voice, but there was something else, too. Maybe a nascent respect? Or just an acknowledgement of reality. I'm glad, Dwight, I said sincerely. I really am. And I'm proud of you. He chuckled as if he didn't believe me. When you get back, he said after a pause, the kids would like to visit you again, if you don't mind. Of course I don't mind, I smiled. My door is always open for them, and for you too. He nodded, not answering the smile, but not rejecting my words either. The cab pulled up. It was time to say goodbye. I hugged my grandchildren again, promising to bring them souvenirs and tell them all about my adventures. Dwight helped the driver load my suitcases into the trunk, then awkwardly shook my hand. Not a hug, but something. Have a good vacation, Mom, he said. You deserve it. I got into the cab, waving to the kids before they were out of sight. My heart was full of different emotions. Sadness at the parting, joy at the unexpected meeting, hope for a possible reconciliation in the future. But above all, I felt a quiet confidence in my decision. For the first time in 15 years, I was doing something exclusively for myself. I was flying to the other side of the country to see the places I dreamed of, to experience new things, to enjoy life. As the cab pulled onto the highway leading to Boston, I leaned back in the seat and stared out the window at the winter landscape whizzing by. Soon it would change to palm trees, turquoise waves, golden beaches. And I would be there not as someone's mother or grandmother, not as an ATM or a convenient adjunct to someone else's life, but as Beatrice Holt, a woman who has finally learned to value herself and her independence.